we have analyzed Hinduism on the basis of just a simple, rational idea of when the rules one uses when one writes down defenses or offenses in religious or philosophical or political or geographical ideas. The rules of language, context, and logic must prevail to make the work plausible, even believable, reliable. Now what the apologists say, those who are Hindu, say in defense of the VARNA-VYAVASTHA. Let me consider what the apologists of VARNA-VYAVASTHA have to say in its defense. The standard defense in VV is to say that it is a system of division of labor. It is easy to grant that division of labor is essential for any complex society, but it is equally easy to see that VV is not a system of division of labor based on aptitude and capability. It is a system of division of labor based on birth. Besides, it has other associated features such as feeling of superiority and inferiority, inequality before law, denial of equal access to knowledge, and prohibition against intermarriage. What have these features to do with the division of labor? Division of labor is found in all societies, but VV is not. Thus, trying to justify VV as a division of labor is a futile exercise. Point 2. Another standard defense of the VV is to say that the system was originally based on the aptitude and capability. Whether it was actually ever so is a subject for historical research. Most probably the racial theory of the origin of castes is true. However, even if we grant for the sake of argument that the VV was originally based on aptitude and capability, how does it help? We cannot say that because the system was originally sometime in the remote past based on aptitude and capability, therefore we ought to gladly suffer the present system based on birth. It hardly makes any sense at all. In any case, Manusmriti was most probably written between 200 BC and 200 AD, and the system as outlined in it is totally based on birth. Gautama Buddha, who lived in 6th century BC, challenged the infallibility of the Vedas as well as the VV. There are several passages in Triptaka, mainly in Dikya, Madhyama, and all the others, which are directed toward the claims of the Brahmins to be of different origin from the rest of humanity, born from the mouth of Brahma, having a heredity prerogative to teach, guide, and spiritually govern the rest of the society. There is, however, no proof of this. In Majjhima Nikaya, Buddha is quoted as refuting VV on several occasions. According to Buddha, it is unreasonable to decide one's place and functions in society on the basis of one's birth in a caste. Buddha is also quoted as insisting that in the eyes of the law all persons ought to be treated as equal, irrespective of the caste or varna in which he or she is born. Thus it is obvious that even if the system of VV ever existed in its ideal form, which it is doubtful, there is no proof of it, it had already degenerated by the time of Buddha, that is about 2,500 years back. The most blatant defense of VV, however, is to say that human beings are born unequal, and therefore it is natural and normal for children to join the occupation of their fathers. There's so much wrong with that statement. Gandhi inadequately defended VV. Surprisingly and sadly, no less a person than Gandhi defended VV in a similar manner. To quote Gandhi, "I believe that every man is born in the world with certain natural tendencies. Every person is born with certain definite limitations which he cannot overcome. From a careful observation of these limitations, the law of Varna was deduced. It establishes certain spheres of actions for certain people with certain tendencies, but none of this is based on birth. This avoided all unworthy competition." Why is competition unworthy? Whilst recognizing limitations, the law of Varna admitted of no distinction of high and low. On the one hand, it guaranteed to each the fruits of his labors, and on the other hand, it prevented him from pressing upon his neighbor. This great law has been degraded and fallen into disrepute, but my conviction is that an ideal social order will only be evolved when the implications of this law are fully recognized and understood and given effect to. That's ridiculous because we measure things from history in various societies and we find that not all people of the same birth are of the same value in terms of productivity in certain areas. There can be a big difference amongst twins. Again, I regard Varna-Shrama as a healthy division of work based on birth. Gandhi says, the present ideas of caste are a perversion of the original. So, why don't we just change it, fix it? No, we're going to leave it the way it was because originally it was good. There is no question with me of superiority or inferiority. It is purely a question of duty. I have indeed stated that Varna is based on birth, but I have also said that it is possible for a Shudra, for instance, to become a Vaishya. But in order to perform the duty of Vaishya, he does not need the label of Vaishya. He who performs the duty of a Brahmin will easily become one in the next incarnation. So you've got to wait till your next life. So, VARNA-VYAVASTHA, according to Gandhi, is a healthy division of work based on birth, which takes into account the natural tendencies of human beings and avoids unworthy competition, whatever this means. This apparently plausible defense of VV is in fact most unscientific. It is a well-known and scientifically verified fact that acquired characteristics are not inherited biologically. Only genetic qualities are transmitted from one generation to another. For instance, carpentry is an acquired characteristic, just as knowledge of philosophy is an acquired quality. Neither a carpenter's son or daughter is born with the knowledge of carpentry, nor is a philosopher's daughter or son born with the knowledge of philosophy. These are acquired characteristics, and therefore they cannot be inherited biologically. If sometimes, though not always, a carpenter's son becomes a good carpenter, or a philosopher's daughter acquires a good knowledge of philosophy without being formally initiated into these disciplines, it is not because they are born with the required knowledge, but only because of the favorable environment at home, which enables them to acquire these characteristics. The result could be different if their places were to be interchanged. One may say that though the knowledge of carpentry or philosophy is not inherited biologically, the mental qualities enabling one to acquire the requisite knowledge is inherited. Some physical and mental qualities are, no doubt, inherited, but this does not mean that parents and their children are always identical in physical and mental qualities. It is a well-known fact that anybody can verify this by careful observation that due to different permutations and combinations of chromosomes and genes, offspring of same parents are not always identical to one another or to the parents. More often than not, they are different. For instance, one son or daughter of same parents may be tall and another short. The color of skin, hair color, and eyes may differ likewise. What is true of physical characteristics is equally true of mental qualities. Thus, the child may or may not have the mental characteristics which the father has. Therefore, it is totally unscientific to forcefully restrict children to the occupations of their forefathers. It is true that all human beings are not equal in the sense of being identical in physical or mental qualities, but it does not follow from this that they ought to be denied equal opportunity to join a vocation of their choice, or that they ought to be denied equality before the law or equal respect to human beings in the society. As for unworthy competition, how do we know that the competition is unworthy unless all are, to begin with, given equal opportunity? Take the example of Gandhi himself. He was a Banya by caste, yet, in spite of some serious aberrations such as supporting VARNA-VV based on birth and linking politics with religion, he performed fairly well in the role of a national leader. It would have been a great loss for the nation if, in the name of avoiding unworthy competition in politics, Gandhi would have been confined to running a grocery shop. Similarly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was born in an untouchable caste, but he played an important role in the drafting of the Democratic Constitution of Independent India. So much for that. He also taught in a college for some time. To use the terminology of VV, he ably performed the work of a Brahmin. Is it possible to imagine how many Ambedkars we may have lost by now owing to the restrictive VV? As we have noted earlier, VV is a closed system of social stratification without any scope for upward social mobility. To quote M. Haralambos, author of a textbook on sociology, a person belongs to his parents' jati and automatically follows the occupation of the jati into which he was born. There is thus no matter what the biologically based aptitude and capabilities of an untouchable, there is no way he can become a Brahmin, unless it is assumed that superior genes are permanently located in the Brahmin caste, and there is no evidence that this is the case. Then there is probably no relationship between genetically based and socially created inequality in traditional Hindu society. So returning to Gandhi, though Gandhi was opposed to untouchability and caste, he did not carry his opposition to its logical conclusion. Inconsistently enough, he continued to support the VV based on birth. At one stage, he even supported restrictions on interdining and intermarriage. As he wrote in Young India in 1921, Hinduism does not emphatically discourage interdining and intermarriage between divisions. It is no part of a Hindu's duty to dine with his son, and by restricting his choice of a bride to a particular group, he exercises rare self-restraint. Prohibition against intermarriage and interdining is essential for the rapid evolution of the soul. Later, Gandhi moved away from these orthodox ideas and started supporting intercaste marriages. Finally, in 1946, he refused to solemnize any marriage of Savagram Ashram unless one of the parties was an untouchable. Maybe he would have also given up VV if he had lived longer. That, however, is in the realm of imagination. The fact is that Gandhi supported VV. It is worth noting that he invented his own conception of VV, however, which, according to him, had nothing to do with the feeling of superiority and inferiority or with prohibition against intermarriage. We find here Gandhi a quaint mixture of conservatism and reformism. I would like to dispose of one last objection before concluding this section. One may say that the Hindu law at present is quite different from what Manu desired, and presently Hindus in general do not follow Manu in totality. This is true. The Hindu law at present, for instance, allows intercaste marriage and prohibits bigamy and child marriage. It permits divorce. It also allows widow remarriage and grants equal rights to daughters and fathers' property. Nevertheless, there seems to be a gap between the progressive Hindu law and the conservative social practices of the Hindus. The majority of Hindu marriages are still within the caste, and very few Hindu women actually claim or get a share in father's property. The Indian Constitution has rightly made special provisions, such as reservations in services for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other socially and educationally backward classes, to enable them to enter occupations and positions of power, which had been traditionally denied to them. No doubt, some upper caste liberal Hindus, too, support the policy of reservation, but by and large, the Hindu upper castes are far from fully reconciled to this progressive step, as is evident from violent and aggressive anti-reservation agitation spearheaded by upper caste students from time to time. This kind of reactionary agitation aimed at preserving the present dominance of upper castes in education and the service enjoys considerable support and sympathy in the upper caste dominated media as well as the academia. On the whole, the Hindu society is yet to fully exercise the ghosts of Manu. Caste based on birth and untouchability still exists in the Hindu society, in spite of the fact that untouchability has been abolished by the Indian Constitution. The distribution of education, power, and wealth continues to be uneven in the Hindu society, with the Dvijas being on the top and the Shudras and untouchables being at the bottom. Teaching is no more an exclusive preserve of Brahmins, but the occupation of Hindu priests is still fully reserved for Brahmins, though this fact does not arouse the ire of our fervent anti-revolutionists. These others, Moshka, Kamavada, Avatara, and Moshka, is traditionally regarded as the highest end of life in Hindu religion. The endless cycle of birth and death is considered a bondage from which one must attain liberation. That is, moksha and mukti. The whole concept of bondage and liberation is based on the unproved assumption of life after death, and the existence of soul, atma, which continues to exist apart from the body even after death. In the famous words of Gita, the soul changes bodies just as human beings change clothes. Now, there are no good reasons for believing in the existence of soul or life after death or rebirth. Actually, there are in the Bible, because it's a wholly reliable, non-contradictory book. So these beliefs are not at all supported by incontrovertible scientific evidence. According to S.N. Dasgupta, there has seldom been before or after Buddha any serious attempt to prove or disprove the doctrine of rebirth. The attempts to prove the doctrine of rebirth, meaning reincarnation into another being, might be an animal, might be an inadequate, unlive rock or whatever, are slight and inadequate. However, even before Buddha, Lokayat had disproved the existence of soul life after death.